I know you've seen those crazy huge layer cakes. They are all over Instagram, they're all over Pinterest, they're like skyscrapers. Who eats that? If you're interested in making a layer cake that is a little more reasonable and something that you can actually do at home, then I invite you to stick around for today's video. Hi, I'm Patty, and welcome to my handmade lifestyle. I go by Patty Mac Makes everywhere online. On this channel, we're super into bakes and makes and plants and all that fun stuff that goes into living an analog life in this crazy digital world. So if that is appealing to you, I invite you to like today's video and subscribe to the channel. Let's get into the video subject for today, which is how to make a layer cake at home. There are millions of videos about this, absolutely millions, and most of them are a little bit much. I'm going to show you how a home cook does it because I am a home cook. I'm a home baker. We're in my kitchen. You can see the cake layers behind me. We've already baked the cake. What you can't see over here is that I've already made the frosting. The frosting recipe is my American buttercream. I'll link to that up here for you. Here, yeah, up here. The cake is a cake mix hack, and I'll link to that video also up here. This is part of a series where we prep the cake pans, bake the cake, and now we're going to assemble the layers. Yeah, make sure that you check out all of the videos in the series. So let's jump in and see exactly what we're going to do to make today's cake. Over here, you'll see I've got my cooled cake layers, and I want you to notice that the tops are really domed. That's just how these cakes bake. They dome at the top, and if we want to have a layer cake, we have to level them. There are a couple of ways you can do it. We're going to use a cake leveler in this video. But you do have to trim the tops of your cakes so they're flat. If you want, you could leave your top layer with the dome. That's no problem. It's whatever you like. But the way they're showing cakes these days, they're flat on top and they're nice and straight on the sides. And so that's what we're going to do in this video. I'm going to be straight up with you. Making layer cakes really does take some stuff. You're going to need a few things to get this to work and to have them look nice. So even though we're not trying to do the crazy skyscraper cakes, you still need some things. So what I did was baked 3 layers, and mine are 6-inch cakes, and we're going to swing over here and I'll show you some of the other things that we'll wind up using. I have a couple of different spatulas that I use. I have that little silicone spoon set. That's nice for scooping the frosting. I have that little bench scraper. We'll use that to try to smooth our sides out a little bit. I have a cake plate there in the back, and then over here to the side, I've got a little Lazy Susan. So like I don't have a cake turntable and all of the stuff that you're supposed to have to do this professionally because I'm not a professional. This is not a professional cake decorating video. This is making a layer cake at home. So you still need to have a few things. And the little cake plate, that's optional. You can put it on whatever you want, but I think a footed cake plate looks really nice. Let me show you the cake leveler. This is what it is. It's a Wilton product. I found it on the cake aisle in my Joann's, so these are easy to find. It was inexpensive. With a coupon, it was like $5. So the question is, do you have to have this? No, you can use a serrated knife. Another trick that goes around in Pinterest is using dental floss, and that can work, but it can also tear up your cake. And if you've got like mint flavoring or something, the flavor will transfer. So be careful with that. Okay, let's jump into putting this whole thing together. So with the cake leveler, you set the height that you want, and then you just kind of saw back and forth and it will take off that top layer, and then all of your cakes are exactly the same height. Now I'm putting a little bit of frosting onto the plate where I'm going to put my cake, and that will help the cake to stick to the plate, which is important when we start putting frosting on. And then the parchment will catch the excess frosting and crumbs, and it just makes a neater plate. So I told you I like those silicone spoons. I use that to get the frosting onto that first layer, and you're just going to then use your little offset spatula to smooth it around. And you're just basically trying to get it even. You want to get it all the way to the edges. I had to add a little bit more to smooth that out, and just make sure that it's even so that when you put the next layer on, your cake edges are straight. You want your cake to be level. We've gone to all this trouble to level the layers. We don't want to then throw them off by having uneven frosting. So when you get to the top layer, turn it upside down so that your bottom is your top, and then you get a really nice sharp corner to the top. And then go ahead and put some frosting on the top, work it down the sides, work it all the way around the cake, and just you can be a little heavy-handed with it, but go ahead and get it on there. This is what we're calling a crumb coat, and so the point of this is to just lock in those crumbs. And then you can see here, I'm using my little bench scraper to just take off the extra frosting, and there's quite a bit. Don't put that frosting back into your frosting batch because it's full of crumbs, and you don't want to put crumbs into your clean frosting. And then just take a little time to clean it up. You want it as neat as you can get it, and then you've got your lightly coated, crumb coated cake, which is really super pretty on its own. It's the next day. I ran out of light, I ran out of time, and so I had to wrap my cake and save it to finish today. And I think this is important to share with you because I know that if you're a mom, if you're a working, busy person, sometimes you might not be able to finish this whole cake in one go. We have limited time that we can spend on baking and making, and sometimes we just have to work as far as we can and then stop, and that's fine. So I wanted you to know that I had to stop, and I just covered my cake with plastic wrap. I put it in the garage overnight because it was cool and dry out there, and so it kept it cool. It was a drier environment, and I brought it back inside so it could come to the temperature in the kitchen here before we get started. So it's had time to set up and be comfortable with the temperatures in here. So I'm going to now pop it in the freezer so I can chill just the outside. And I want to share this with you. When you do the light crumb coating and you pop it in the freezer, you only want to do it for 10 or 15 minutes. What you are trying to do is to make the outside of your cake cold and set, not the inside. If you have the cake freeze all the way through or be heavily refrigerated all the way through, there is a chance when you put on your top layer of frosting that your cake can start to sweat. And nobody wants a sweaty cake, okay? That just sounds horrible. So you don't want to mess it up at the end. Somebody shared that information with me who does cake decorating for a living. That was her suggestion, is don't let it be in there too long because there are changes in hot and cold and humid and dry. I mean, there's just so much. So what I'm going to do now is pop it in the freezer for 10-15 minutes, and we're going to revive yesterday's frosting. I want to show you what I did with that. Buttercream will form like a crust or get crispy on the edges if you let it be in contact with air for too long. It's all right once it's on your cake and it's set up and, we expect it. But when you go to frost, it's a mess. If you're going to do like I did and have to split up your baking and decorating time, what you need is a super airtight container to put your buttercream in. And that's what I did here. So you could do those OXO brand containers, the glass with the plastic, they seal really good. This is Lock and Lock from QVC, which I love. They work beautifully. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this frosting, we're going to put it in a bowl. I'm going to whip it with a hand mixer. I'm going to add a little bit of milk to it just to kind of thin it out and get it back to a good frosting consistency. And we're going to do that while our cake is over here in the freezer. And then it will be ready for us to put on our top layer of frosting, which is the fun part of this, right? Okay, let's do it. First thing I'm going to do is get the frosting out of its container, and it's still smooth on top. It's just really super thick this morning, and that's going to be impossible to frost a cake. It's not spreadable consistency at the moment. So we're just going to add a little bit of milk and revive it. I'm adding a little bit of milk just to re-whip this frosting. At the time that I filmed this video, it was January, it was cold, it was dry, and so it needed a little more milk than I would use in the summertime. So you have to use your judgment when you're working with frosting. And basically I'm just whipping it until I get it to a softer, more spreadable consistency, and you can see how that's really starting to come together now. You definitely do not want to overdo it when you're adding liquid back to the frosting because you don't want it to be too soft. So only add maybe a teaspoon at a time until you get it where it's spreadable. And here you can see I'm testing it with a palette knife, and it's much softer. It's much easier to get onto the cake. So I'm starting by putting my frosting on the top of the cake, and then I'm using that palette knife just to kind of smooth it around and over the sides. And really at this point you're just trying to get it onto the cake, so don't worry too much about how it looks. This point is just get the frosting onto the cake. Try to be somewhat even about it. I mean, you don't want huge globs on one side and not the other, but don't flip. You're going to use that bench scraper to smooth it out a little bit. And you know, this is where I had mentioned earlier, I kind of wish I hadn't done that second chill, because it wound up making my buttercream really cold, and it was hard to work with. And you can see there that frosting was a little bit of a challenge to smooth out. So I think my cake was a little bit too cold, and that's okay. I just kept adding frosting and smoothing it out. And you know, I just want you to see that sometimes you are going to have to work with a situation to get your frosting to work. And so what I decided to do was to just keep going. I just used that little palette knife to smooth it as best I could. But it was not the easiest cake I've ever frosted, let me just say. You know, then when I got it all on there the way I wanted, I used the knife to kind of scrape my sides in an upward fashion. And, you know, it looks really good when it's done. When you're decorating your cake or frosting your cake, you just have to kind of keep going. It's going to look worse before it looks better. That's just kind of the way it is. So just keep going and don't freak out. And you're going to probably go over the sides and the top a couple of times. You know, that's all right. You can see as I keep working with it, it just gets better and better. And, you know, I'm doing it right on the cake plate. Nothing fancy. So now I'm done. I'm pulling those papers out from under the cake, and you can see how much frosting and mess it's pulling away with it. So that kept my plate really clean. And for anything that was left, I just used a damp paper towel to clean that up. So now I have a nice clean foundation to finish my decorating. And I put that 1M tip into my reusable frosting bag. And all I'm doing is just a little squeeze, and it makes that little star-looking shape at the bottom. It adds a lot to your cake if you do a little frosting decoration at the base. That really jazzes things up. It's not hard to do. It doesn't take a lot of time, but oh my gosh, the wow factor when you put the decoration at the base is pretty big. So I encourage you to try that. Look how pretty it is. So now we're going to do our little swirls on top, and look how easy that is. I'm just anchoring and swirling and pulling away, and it looks beautiful. And you put the little swirls on the top, you add your sprinkles, and you've got a gorgeous little cake. So I smoothed it the best that I could. I used what I had available, and then I just used my little palette knife to create texture. And I think it works really well. And I made one before today's cake in pink, and I'll put that on the screen for you now so you can see it. This cake I posted in baking groups, and people went bananas, okay, bananas. And they all wanted the recipe, and they all wanted this, and they all wanted that, and on and on and on. And then when I told them the recipe is it's a cake mix, I thought they were going to lose their minds. But who cares? I mean, they can't taste it, so, you know, what does that matter? I was like, you can do any cake that you want. It doesn't matter. And the frosting is American buttercream, and you can flavor that or color it any way that you want. But my point is, in groups full of professional bakers, my little home cake really grabbed attention, and people loved it. And there is a lot to be said for simplicity. Everything doesn't have to be Instagram or Pinterest perfect all the time. You can still make really nice things if you take your time, if you learn some foundation steps, and really get into your process. Because I am a home baker and not a professional baker, it took me longer than it would take a professional to do this cake. And so I wound up doing it over 2 sessions. So the first session, I baked the cake. I made the frosting. The frosting is my American buttercream. I'll link that up here. I did go up another third. So I'll give you the measurements that I used to make the frosting, but the technique that I used is in that video. And I basically followed the instructions from Cupcake Gemma on making the buttercream. So I baked, I leveled, I did a very super light crumb coat, and then I wrapped the cake for the night, and I put it in the garage where it was cool, and let it just sit up until I could actually do the frosting today. You want to be fresh, you want to feel good when you're frosting your cake, because it's a little bit of work. You're going to have to fiddle with it a little bit to get it to look just the way you want it. But I used that little technique with the offset spatula, and you know, it really looks good. People that I know who decorate professionally loved the technique, and they felt like that is such a cute way to really even add more to the height of the cake. So it's a cute little technique, and it's one that I'm going to continue using as I frost and decorate my own cakes at home. And the first cake that I made, which is the pink cake, I'm going to put that back on screen for you. When I piped on the little details around the base and on the top, I put the frosting into a Ziploc bag. I cut the corner, and I just used that. And you can see that's really cute. It worked really well. In today's video, I went ahead and used my Wilton 1M tip. It's an open star tip. If you only have one, that is the one to get. And then I used my reusable frosting bag. I went ahead and used my reusable bag with the frosting tip, and just to show you, it's very simple to get a wow factor with a really simple technique. That's the video for today. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you feel inspired to make your own little cake. I love this. I think it's beautiful. I can't wait to take it out and cut it and get pictures and share those with you. You can see more pictures of this really sweet cake on my website, which I will link below. I will also have a printable recipe card over there for you. So if you want to make it, you can go right there, print out your card. All the instructions will be on it. And you can see more pictures of this really pretty little cake. And you can see how it looks when I cut into it. And there's a trick to that too. But you'll have to go to the blog post if you want to see that. I hope that inspires you to make your own beautiful little layer cakes at home. And that's what I have for you in this series. If you have questions, drop them below. Please make sure that you tag me on Instagram at Patty Mac Bakes if you bake this little cake. And yeah, that's everything for now. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks. Bye-bye.